All right, good morning everyone. How is everyone doing? Hopefully you can see and hear me just fine. Welcome everyone, good to have you here. My name is Paul Trani and we're covering illustration as the video just showed. So good morning to you. Hopefully everybody's having a wonderful morning or afternoon or evening. I'm not sure where this finds you. Tim, good to have you in the house. Satya, Saeed, Narendra, I apologize. Jose, what's up, my friend? So this is good. I'm going to dive into illustration, both on mobile and on desktop. So this is your crash course in all things illustration. So good to have you, Thomas Benner and Nathan. All right. So looks good. Sounds clear. I got the thumbs up from Jessica. So we can dive on into this. I want to be respectful of your time and quite frankly, why are we covering this? Well, we have a really fantastic week happening. So we basically have an illustration this week, Illustration Week on behance.net/live. Sarah Young is going to be live with us tomorrow. And yeah, so let's I want to like take a look at. Some of them are going to be working on mobile, and some are either going to be on Adobe Photoshop Sketch or Adobe Illustrator Draw, and then transferring to their respective apps. But this is the schedule this week. Sarah Young, actually, she's an illustrator. She's going to work in Photoshop Sketch, which is going to be cool, and kind of show off her traditional style or her signature style, and I can share that with you. Then we have Timmy Ham, who really does a lot of stuff in Illustrator Draw, okay? And then, again, that can be synced to Illustrator. Meg Hunt is then going to be up. She does a lot of digital illustration using Photoshop, which is awesome, and we need to talk about that. And then we also have Douglas Gomez as well. Is going to be creating a t-shirt illustration in Illustrator Draw and then bring that into Illustrator. So quite a mix of things that we have going on. So I hope you're able to check it out, Alex and Nathan and Mancy and everyone. That'd be wonderful. Hopefully everybody's doing well today. I'm going to kind of dive into what I'm going to talk about this morning, shall we? Irfan, your response is correct. You should be excited because this is really cool stuff. And really I feel like I've if you're working in, in the digital arts, then you have the best job in the world. So, yeah, so that's certainly hope you are. All right. And Nathan's actually working on an illustration as we speak, so that's perfect. But this is what I'm going to cover today. So I'm going to talk about the fundamentals of Illustrator Draw, and then diving into Illustrator as well. So again, using basic brushes that's right, let me just close that. Using basic brushes in these various apps, such as, and I'm just getting this set up now. Let's just remove that. Fantastic, cool. So using basic brushes, using layers, and both apps have layers, but again, I'm going to start out working in mobile, and then I'll transfer these to Illustrator and to Photoshop. But I'm going to show you some things like, there's certain sort of stamps that you have, how you can actually use an image in the background to kind of trace over it, and then transfer that to the appropriate app. And again, Photoshop Sketch has some new features. One that I'm mainly going to talk about today, which is going to be the large document format, which is awesome because it allows you to work on mobile at a high resolution, and then of course do any finishing on your desktop. And again, you have that sort of nice flexibility when it comes to Photoshop Sketch. And really, I like Illustrator Draw as well. So let's dive into this. I'm going to switch to my screen, and when I say switch to my screen, I'm actually just switching to you can see right here, my iPad. Okay, so that's what's happening right now. I'm actually just on my iPad, and it's an iPad Pro, and I'm going to be using, let's get that out of the way, notifications. I'm going to use right here Apple Pencil on an iPad Pro, okay? But this will work on iOS and Android. You can see all the apps that I typically use in a given day, but we're going to focus on these ones right over here. Let's kind of move this out of the way too. Right here, Adobe Illustrator Draw, as it's known, and then Adobe Photoshop Sketch. I do want to say that we actually have an update coming to Adobe Capture very soon as well. It's just amazing how fast development happens on all these things. But I'm going to start Illustrator Draw right here. You can download that, iOS and Android, and that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm just going to launch it. And I'll just, I will only be checking chat at just certain intervals. I want to make sure that this is a training session, so that's what I'm going to focus on. And you can see a number of pieces that I've kind of worked on, again, just randomly. And I'm going to dive into this. In fact, I'll just dive into just sort of creating a new project, okay? And you can do that quite easily. In fact, if I go down here and just hit plus, you can see the different types that you can make. Okay, so we can go through these different formats. Okay, we can even scroll through here. What's nice about Illustrator Draw is it's like resolution independent, if you will. It does have 300 DPI and PPI, DPI, pretty much the same thing. But I'm just going to go with iPad landscape that you can see right here. So I'll select that and launch into that. So blank screen. Let's create some things, right? So first thing you can do is you could obviously use any one of these brushes off to the side, right? And start creating sort of anything that you want. As I start to draw, let's just like draw the, the head of a person. Maybe it's a sort of more of a caricature. Kind of see how I can put this together. What am I doing here essentially? I got to make sure that ear is right. Oh, I kind of screwed up. Guess what? Right down here in the lower left, you have your eraser. So you have your tools off to the side, including your eraser that you can switch to and jump in, just kind of erase the parts that you might have messed up. Okay. Now, when I select my brush, okay, there's more that meets the eye with this brush, okay? Because I can actually just select that brush, and then I dive into its various settings over here, okay? So see these settings over here? I can change, say, for instance, the size. As I click and drag up and drag down, I can change the size. This is important and really cool because Photoshop Sketch and Illustrator Draw treat it exactly the same way. Okay, so they both work this way when it comes to the settings for these brushes. So I can maybe make it a little bit thicker if I want to, and kind of dive into get out of there, notifications. But I can, make this a little thicker, maybe for the eyebrows in this case, and kind of for under the nose, right? So that's what I want to do, even kind of shading down here beneath the chin as I start to work on this, right? And again, I'm just roughing it out real fast, real easily. As I start to want to apply color, and again, this is not my best illustration, obviously. I got, people watching me, but that's all right. It's all good. Gonna create. This is not good, right? And that's what's going to happen. You're going to create something like this, and you're going to be like, oh, it's not good. I need to get a little more fine in here. I can zoom in just using both, just two fingers, pinch and zoom exactly as you think, right? And then you can come in and, you know what? Resize this, make this even smaller. So if I do decide that I want to work on the eyes, right? I can come in here and work on the eyes with sort of a finer detail as I kind of dive into this. And again, I'm still kind of sketching this out really rough, essentially is what I'm doing, okay? So I'm kind of creating the eye here, essentially. And it's not bad, but chances are you're probably going to mess up. Two fingers, right? You could either use the button in the upper right or just two fingers. Oops, we'll swipe, we'll undo. So you can start to see I'm actually undoing this as I swipe back, okay? And then bring that forward as you'd expect, okay? So undo that. We can start to change the color. So coming in here, you guessed it. I want to give them blue eyes, blue, a hint of blue. Again, it's a little bright. Sure, I get it. Let's change it back to black. We can change it back to black and then add that black right in there. And you know what? Let's notch out. Oops. This is what happens sometimes. Even for my eraser actually has the size. So I can take the size down for the eraser and then just take out that notch right there. All in all, this is kind of like not a great illustration. I get it, but I'm showing you also the undo capabilities, right? And guess what? I'm actually working on this layer right over here. See this layer? There's my layer. Imagine that. Just like in Illustrator and Photoshop, you can see all the settings for it. So let's take a look right in here. We can adjust the opacity. And this is a new one, is transforming all layers. You can actually rotate and transform all layers if you want to. It works very easily, right? Does that work? Nathan, I do feel the pressure, but this is typically what people will do is you might not even just start drawing freehand. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select delete right here. You know what? Just delete that entirely new layer. Maybe I have, instead of a draw layer, let's start with an image layer. Okay. Because I'm thinking, you know, I would actually like to start with an image. Where do I have? On my iPad, in my Creative Cloud Files folder, in Libraries, right? Right in here. I can start with pretty much any one of these images that I can pull in, right? I'll go with this bird because this would be a nice... Or at least I like that bird. Or even this chameleon, you know? Adding the image like so. And then selecting done. And now that's my image layer. And guess what? I can add a draw layer on top of that. Okay, so after getting comfortable with, you know, sort of even switching to different brushes and changing their colors, you can work on an actual project. In this case, it's just this one right here. In fact, what I would do typically is select that and maybe take the transparency down a touch. Okay, so that's what I want to do. I want to be always aware of what layer I'm on. And then from there, I can pinch and zoom in on this and start to work on this particular project. So I can start with the color. Let's just select, I kind of want to just draw with a nice dark green. And I'm using this actual brush tip instead of a marker or a flat tipped brush. I'm using this fine tipped brush, and we can dive into working on this project. Again, on that layer, just kind of naturally drawing. See how it's getting thicker? And that's exactly what this brush does. I'm going to take the size down some more. And then I can just start to outline this. Right, you get the idea as I start to work on this illustration. Cool. Keep in mind, I'm actually working in vector here, right? And I'm just roughing this in really fast. Actually, let's undo those last two because I can make those a different color. Right, I have all this like jagged little, let's just gonna squiggly make that arch. Aren't these feet? Aren't chameleons awesome? They are pretty amazing. And keep in mind, this is just a Adobe stock image that I'm kind of using to essentially trace. All right. Look, it's interesting little feet. Fascinating. Let's get rid of that. That's almost too much information right there for this sketch. I would advise you that if you are using like an Apple Pencil, it helps if you get a screen protector that has like a little bit of grit. So get one that has a matte finish, and it's going to slow down your Apple Pencil or whatever stylus you're using because you just need a little bit of drag. Otherwise, it's just like drawing on glass is not fun. Like even right here, I'm having this issue. I need to actually kind of round that, curve that around. Well, guess what? I can rotate the canvas and then continue to draw right here. And get that girl. All right. Okay, we're having fun here. I can connect all of these points I want to show you this. Is really cool. I actually probably have some gaps, but I want to show you this real fast. If, say, for instance, I want to fill in the eye, maybe with a different color, I can do that. In fact, let's just switch colors to something maybe, I don't know, a little brighter. And then I'll just do a long press. And it should fill it. But it doesn't in this case. But I like that actually what I typically do when I start adding multiple colors is I'd add an additional draw layer. And with this new draw layer, I can drag it beneath the current one. So I can have this top layer that kind of serves as my outline, and then I can start coloring underneath. So that's what I typically do. Sort of the second draw layer, I just start coloring underneath it. And that's what I'm doing right now, as I even switch to a different brush with a different color. I will check out chat in a second. I don't want you to feel ignored. I just like, I'm doing this because we have a 3-day live stream that's all about, you guessed it, illustration with some fantastic people. Okay, so there's my rough sketch. In fact, let's switch right over here. I'm going to add a little bit more to it. In this case, just make a nice brown. Now, when it comes to picking colors, and this goes for both, by the way, and thank you, Renee, so much for answering questions. If you can kind of help me out in chat, that'd be fantastic. But essentially, right over here, we have the ability to sort of pick different colors based on a color wheel, as you can see right here, or we could do a drop down if you're more comfortable with RGB, which nobody is. You're typically going to use your color wheel, but if you are using something specific, you do have your various themes, and then even in your library, you can actually access, say, miscellaneous. Here I have a bunch of miscellaneous skin tones that I was working on. I can access those colors too. So all pretty straightforward. In this case, I just need a nice brown. We'll just like go like that. This is the branch. Really loose. The nice thing is I can do just a nice sketch here, and then I'm going to switch to Photoshop Sketch in a second, but then I can take it and sync this to my desktop, okay? All right, so again, this is just my initial sketch. We can sync this to Illustrator or Photoshop. Guess what? I'm going to pick Illustrator because, again, I'm working in Adobe Illustrator Draw. We should see a little pop-up that says, hey, sent. It'll say sent. Right, what happens? Oh, guess what? It just opened. Again, I'm switching to my desktop. Here is what is on my iPad, and then here it is in Illustrator. Guess what? As we suspected, let's move this over. Here are my layers in Photoshop Sketch. Here are my layers in Illustrator Draw. I apologize. And then here they are in Illustrator, right? The same layers, easy enough. I can turn off that background layer and kind of see what I ended up with and what needs work. Because right now I'm thinking, you know what? For this color right here, turning this, actually locking that layer. Look, this is actually a vector layer that it gives me. This is fantastic. So now you know what? Instead of having that be just this solid color, let's like make it a radial gradient and then change that color right there. All right. So that's what I would do in this case. Give me 1 second as I do that. Still giving it that tint of green, something like that. Cool. So leveraging the power of Illustrator, as well as just the ease of drawing, quite frankly, more naturally on an iPad. So again, I can work on that some more, but you get the idea. Any questions about Illustrator Draw? Just let me know. Yeah, Matthias, Rocky Rourke's fantastic person using Adobe Illustrator Draw. Also, Robzilla is really good at Illustrator Draw. And just kind of check out the schedule just so you can see. And I'm doing the same thing. But let me switch to the schedule for this week because you can see right here, in fact, we have Timmy Ham is going to be the one probably working the most in Illustrator Draw. So that's going to be super cool. And then also Douglas Gomez. So Tim and Doug will, and I actually don't know if they go by Tim or Doug, but those are the two that will be working in Illustrator Draw, ending up with probably something much cooler. But again, I'm not here to impress you with my drawing skills. I'm here to teach you stuff, right? And really eliminate any confusion around these apps. Oh, yes. Ibrahim, yes, you did a sketch and then you sent it to your desktop and then it opened up and everybody freaked out. That's awesome. And again, this is all vector. Look, like I'm noticing, oh, I screwed up right over here. Huh, I gotta fix that. All right, look at that little dot just kind of hanging out there. It's like, hey, what am I doing here, right? We just remove that, and I can add whatever else I want to it. And again, you know why it's white? You think I need to color it, but the chameleon is actually on a white piece of paper, so he actually is the color he needs to be. He's just blending in. Yes. So again, and what I was pointing out with the eye is I was just showing you that you can select anything and it's going to be vector, and then you can change it accordingly, like I'm doing right now, just giving it a radial sort of gradient right there. Okay, so that's all I would do in this case. In fact, I'd probably move this over like that. Cool. Done and done. Let's move on because there's more things I need to show, right? And I will save this. This will be... The great thing is, again, it is in Illustrator, so I can save it as whatever I want and move on. Oh, by the way, I'm going to point this out. It actually saves it in my Creative Cloud files is where it saves it, but I could actually do a save as and save it to my desktop and call it Chameleon. Come on, Chameleon. All right, let's move on to something equally as cool as I minimize Illustrator. Here I am back on my iPad in Illustrator Draw, right? That's good. I'm going to close that, and I'm going to launch Adobe Photoshop Sketch, okay? And this is really cool because what do we have here? Sure, a number of sketches and random stuff that I'm working on, but we can actually add not only these different sizes, but clear down to a large document size. So right over here, this is the brand new feature that I'm sneaking today, essentially. You can see this Thomas and Nathan right over here. We can do poster sizes, 18 by 24 inches at 300 ppi. Why does this matter? Well, it's because Illustrator Draw is resolution independent. Photoshop Sketch is dependent on your resolution, right? So you're actually, pushing pixels around instead of vectors. So be mindful of the resolution that you're working at, and that's what is happening here. 300 dpi or ppi, which is fantastic. In fact, it goes as high as, in case you're wondering, it goes as high as, just checking, 8092 by 8092 pixel size. So that's as high as it goes. So your guest at Heidi Morrow, posters. So we can make posters on a mobile app that are going to be full res that we can work with. And again, this goes for Android and for iOS. I think it's actually... Okay, so I don't know if this is public knowledge yet, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. But Adobe Photoshop Sketch and Draw are both on iOS and Android. Both are getting this large document format on iOS within the month. And then Android follows later. Okay, so this is going to come to you on iOS this month, and then Android is not far behind. So I'll just launch this poster size. All right. Diving into this getting started in illustration, I'm going to check out Photoshop Sketch. You can see right over here, it already looks different. Otherwise, it looks largely the same, but look at these very delicate, nice brushes that we have over here. Look, we have a pencil. We have an actual brush, what looks like an actual brush. So we got a pencil. Yep, guess what? It looks like a pencil. Guess what? I'm holding this sideways, right? What do I get? I'm holding my Apple Pencil sideways. It works exactly the way a brush should work as I do that. And again, just 2-finger swipe will remove it. I want to kind of dive in and just kind of refine things more with a pen look. We can get into a brush. Again, a just nice watercolor brush. And then I love this one, by the way. And let's just check its color. And let's increase the size of it. But I love this brush here, okay? So this is like your... more like an oil brush, right? For like you have oil paint on it. And from here it could be like beautiful, right? Look at those strokes. In fact, let's make it larger because I love how awesome it looks, right? Right? Oh, let's redo that last one. Undo that last one. I'll do this like 50 times. All right, but look at this. Oh, look at this brush stroke. That's what a brush stroke should look like. This is, again, Photoshop Sketch gives me that brush stroke. I can pinch and zoom. Same way like I can with Illustrator Draw. Guess what? Can I rotate it? Yes, guess what? I can rotate it. And I just made an ambigram, something I've just been working on a lot lately. And from there, I can even access the eraser and refine this. Kind of need to take off the end there. Let's rotate it back, because I noticed that was kind of messed up when I flipped it over. And we're back. Also, as I rotate it, we could see the percentage and the size, actually, in the upper right, okay? There's also these settings up here that I can take a look at. Right here, rotate the canvas 90 degrees. Easy to do, okay? And now I don't know which way is up, but essentially this is the right direction, okay? Easy enough. I'm drawing on that layer. I kind of want to swipe back. Even when I undo this, it's undoing the rotation is what's happening. And from here, I can do some more things. So let's do some more things with this. And I'm not even crazy about what I'm making here. Is that okay that I switch it up a little bit? This last one is really tough. But notice how hard it is. I'll just rotate it this way since I need this to look like a P. I'm just rotating it back around, and we can do like that. There we go. That's what I want. So here's my design. Right? Now what I'm going to do is add a layer just like I can in Illustrator Draw. And I'm going to add a sketch layer. Okay? And guess what? I can reorder these layers. I can move that down. For this one, I can say, hey, you know what? I want a cool circle or a box or some other shape. I have access to additional shapes. Okay, so don't think you have to work just all freehand. You can dive into what you have here. So let's just take a circle, for instance, right? Here's the circle that I get. Let's resize it, right? I just want to have a nice little circle kind of on the inside with a different color. All right, like that. Let's just change this to like a green. And then from there, watch. I got that. Thank you very much. Look, I can just draw right on that perfect curve because I can't draw curves otherwise. It gives me that perfect circle, okay? From there, again, there's additional shapes. Through here, we have French curves, polygons, and then more shapes right down here, as you can see. Cool? Again, selecting this one. I kind of don't want a stop sign for my name. How about a starburst right there? Resizing. You know what it can do. You get the idea. Maybe making it a little bit bigger on a new sketch layer and then drawing accordingly with a bright yellow. Right? You get the idea. And I can also just double tap. If I double tap, it fills it in exactly as expected. Cool. All right. All right. Well, if I actually have shown Thomas a tip, well then, wow, Thomas knows everything. So that's awesome. Let's switch to another brush, because this is the cool thing about Photoshop Sketch. I love Photoshop Sketch because it simulates these real world brushes. Okay, so if I decide maybe I actually want to turn off this star, I don't want to get rid of it, but in here I can just hit this eyeball and then I can turn it off. And I think you could actually double tap and it should do it, or a long press, one of the two. Either way, double tap will actually hide a layer, because I'm actually thinking I'm going to do something else in the background. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to just like get rid of that and use this watercolor brush. This is the last brush I'm going to talk about. But right in here, let's just pick a nice blue, right? Let's pick this blue and let's just give it a nice wash on the inside. So watch this. This is a watercolor brush and this is what Photoshop Sketch gives you. Sure enough, this nice blue, that's great. What if I want to make it purple on the inside? Let's switch the color to this purple, and let me show you what happens if I make this like a darker purple. With a watercolor brush, it's going to work exactly like watercolors work. So again, just painting right in there, look what happens. It's spreading. Look at it spreading, right? Exactly the way watercolors do in real life. So Manuel, Narendra, Ryan, hopefully you like this because this is awesome, right? Simulating a real world brush. Guess what? Right down here it says, hey, do you want to dry it? Do you not want that functionality? You know what? You can just hit this little fan and it will dry it for you. Clicking. Now it's all dry and I can paint, you know, with a different color and it's not going to bleed one into the next. Okay, because I don't want that. Cool. I hope you think that's cool, because I certainly do, even if my artwork is lacking. The goal is just to kind of show you what these brushes can do, and not only that, what we can do from here. Okay? You guys impressed with this? Let me know if you have any questions. I'll pause for a second and answer questions. Adobe Photoshop Sketch allowing you to simulate real-world brushes like I'm doing now, and then go from there. In fact, let me dive into some additional features. Can you import Photoshop brushes into the Sketch app? Oh, well, you're asking Tim, but you could also ask me. Check this out. There's more brushes. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to switch. Maybe I'll turn off this one for a second. Let's add a new layer. Right in here. This little plus sign right down here, you guessed it. You can access additional brushes. Kyle T. Webster's brushes are now available on Photoshop Sketch. Oh, look at all these brushes that we have. Oh, thank you so much. You can see them right in here. We have a wet edge brush, Kyle T. Webster. A smudge, a spray. So if we wanted to try a spray brush, sure, why not? Selecting that brush, checking the color, turning it to something that everybody can see. Maybe that color. That's the spray brush. Let's increase the size. That's the spray brush. And that's also ugly. The drawing is, not the brush. But that's what the spray brush gives you. It's pretty obvious. But right down here, adding, right here, we can select add up at the top as well. So diving into this right here. I know it's kind of hard to see. Selecting that. We can import from our Creative Cloud assets or create in Capture as well as import from other sources. Okay. So this is pretty fantastic. Hopefully it makes sense. I don't have time to cover Capture, but Adobe Capture will allow you to create brushes of really from anything and bring it right in, okay? But again, I can also import from my CC assets. If you do have brushes, you can put them in your CC assets folder and import them. But you can see out of the gate, I have all these ones like ready to go as well. Okay, so I actually might even take a thick acrylic. And what I want to do is maybe I'll still go with this blue. Actually, no, I'm going to take like a watercolor brush. That is set to, let's think, like a red. Okay, and maybe I'll do it a little bit more drastic just so everybody can see it. I'll go back to blue, for instance. But what I want to do now is with this layer selected, this is really cool. Okay, you ready for this, Matt? Essentially, I have this sketch layer selected over here, okay? And I'm thinking, okay, I actually want to paint inside of it, right? I want to paint inside of the letters Paul. That would be really tough to do, right? Or what I want to do is I want to paint inside of this sketch layer right here. Let's turn that back on. What if I want to paint inside of it with more blue, but I just want to cover the edges? So selecting that right in here, you can see, oh, am I losing my, oh, here we go. Paint inside, right down here. I can now paint inside this shape, and then there's a bunch of other options. So selecting paint inside, turned on, you guessed it. Just going around the edges, you can see how I'm making it sort of sharper in this case, or you know, adding whatever I want. Starting to look like a planet, and that's okay. Right. Heidi, yes, this piece should be titled "Why Not?" Exactly right. Show you the flexibility essentially that you have for this layer. You might not be a fan of it. Like, I'm not a fan of what's happening here. Let's move it up to the top so it's in front of everything. Tapping on that layer. Just like in Photoshop, we have blend modes in Photoshop Sketch. So in fact, it shows me what all of these blend modes will look like. So even sort of one-upping Photoshop, I can actually switch to any one of these and see how it's going to interact with the layer behind it. Okay, so you can see right there, now we have that burst, and we can work with it from there. Let's try this one. Soft light. I like soft light anyway. All right, cool. With that done, I'm going to select right up here. I can sync this. I can save this as a PSD, by the way, Simon and Matt. But I can also just send it directly to Photoshop. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send it to Photoshop CC. That's what's happening right now. Sending to my desktop. It will say sent in a second. We can see the little spinny wheel right up here. Little spinny wheel. How many layers can you have? Enough. I actually don't know how many. Maybe Renee can kind of chime in if she could. Renee, I don't know if you know how many layers Adobe Photoshop Sketch has. I think initially it had 10, but it's probably easily more than that. I know for me, typically I'll start out with sort of this size and then end up on my desktop like I am today. By the way, so what's the new feature that we are launching or releasing very soon, as in probably tomorrow, in Photoshop Sketch is large document format. So image, going to the image size, you can see how large it is. So 24 by 18 inches, 300 DPI, created on my iPad Pro in this case. Pretty large. In fact, we can go as high as 8092 by 8092 at 300 DPI. So, but essentially that's the size, poster size, and I can start to work on this some more. Clicking OK. What happens with my layers over here? In fact, I'll move this over because I have, switch over to my, there we are, hit escape. On the right is my Photoshop Sketch, and then here is Photoshop. We can see layers in Sketch, and then layers on my desktop. Sure enough, this sketch layer, remember how I changed it to soft light? It comes in as soft light, okay? So from there, I can continue to work on this. And not only that, even the layers that I've turned off are all here, and I can continue to work on this however I want. Let's move this over. Let's see some other messes that I've made. That's a messy piece that I just transferred earlier. But from there, you can start to work and refine it. I actually just use this as an idea is what I initially used it for. And then what I ended up with on my desktop after kind of doing concepting, I technically ended up with like this sort of artwork is where I ended up. Okay, so just think after kind of like refining, you know, this is kind of, you know, where the design ended up. So even if you're using Photoshop Sketch or Illustrator Draw for concepting, you can, you know, sort of use that and go from there to make what you want and refine your idea on desktop, right? Pretty cool. Switching back over, again, this is my final design. I'll go for about 18 more minutes. And just in case you were wondering, if you're just joining us today, this is pretty much illustration week. It's a fantastic week. My name is Paul Trani. I'm an evangelist for Adobe. And essentially what we have is we have illustrators coming in Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. They're going to be creating fantastic work on behance.net/live. So right here, essentially, Sarah Young, Tim, Meg, Douglas, working on mobile like I was doing, and then also bringing it onto their desktop, into Illustrator, and into Photoshop. So that's what's happening. If you hopefully are on behance.net/live, if you're on YouTube, come over to behance.net/live, and that's the chat that I'm looking at. And that's also where the schedule button is, right up at the top. You can click schedule and see what I just told you. But what I've been covering today is diving into Illustrator Draw and Photoshop Sketch, and then transferring to the desktop. And this is what we've done. We've gone over basic brushes, using layers, drawing on images, okay? So loading in an image in the background and then kind of tracing over it, using brushes as well, and in-app stamps. I'm going to show a couple more features that that are pretty new that people might not know about. They're on mobile, so let's just take a look as I switch back over to my desktop. If that works for you. And yes, we will have challenges the next couple days as well, so keep an eye out for that. Staines wants an Adobe Illustrator Mesh Tool tutorial. Oh, you are my friend, because I was actually just going to cover that today. In fact, in Illustrator. In fact, I have something up already that is done with the Mesh Tool. So you can see it right here. This is done with the Mesh Tool, essentially. So this is the sort of thing that you can create with the Mesh Tool, but you can initially concept on mobile. And again, that's where I'm back. On mobile, we can see this drawing. Sure, it could use a little work, but you know what? Let me show you additional features. Right in here, let's go to... we have layers, we have stamps, we have sending. Oh, this is what I wanted to show you. Time lapse. This is actually recorded by default, so you can actually jump back and see everything I did. So if you are just joining me, Siobhan, right in here, I can just select time lapse, and we should see this play through. Again, this is everything that I've shown the past, or done the past, 10 minutes. All these different things that I've tried. And again, you can see it come together pretty fast. The ability to record, essentially, pretty straightforward, which is awesome. All right. Let's try some more things. In fact, I'm going to close this. Save this sketch. This works for all of them. So even as you dive into this, you're gonna see that it's gonna have the ability to, it should still be there. Time lapse. It's too short, but nonetheless, you can typically sort of see your sketch come together. What I wanted to do is talk about and kind of review working with perspective. Okay, so again, still going to our large document format, poster size. 24 by 18 inches, 300 DPI. Okay, right in here. Let's just go to grids. Let's add a perspective grid. So look what I'm doing here. I have this perspective grid that I can manipulate. So I have these two vanishing points, right, that I can drastically decrease or increase. But this gives me the ability to sort of draw in perspective like that. There's my perspective grid, and from there I can start drawing on this grid. So if I actually use a stamp tool, in this case a square, since I have perspective grid turned on, I can come in here and let's make sure this is thick enough for everybody to see. In fact, let's switch to a different brush. Just double tap. We can see I've done that in perspective. Again, I'll kind of move this. Let's switch to another side. Let's switch to this, you guessed it, to the, move it over, switching it to this right side. And then double tap. In fact, let's just change the color because I would like to. One side's going to be a different color. Done, done. There's that side, right? So we're actually drawing in perspective, as you can see, and I can continue to work this way. Even as I move this up and down, if I wanted just some lines, I can just paint in perspective like that. So this is really fantastic. I don't know if many people know about this. But it is really powerful as I start to, work on something abstract in this case. Okay, so again, I'm glad I had time to show this. I should probably get a better demo together. As I kind of click on this tool, this one right here, hopefully you can see this. Let me zoom in on it. These are the tools that I'm dealing with, these little guys. So this one will allow me to adjust the size, right? So as I drag that to the left and right, it adjusts the size of that shape that I have selected. And then if I tap that square, actually gives me those different sides. So if I wanted to do a top, I guess what I can angle that and put that on top just like that and paint that into perspective like that. Okay. Undo, everything else works as expected. You get the idea. Let's move it down. Let's just create something more like for the bottom. There you go. Oops, sorry, that was off the screen. Sorry, my zoom, but there's essentially what I was working on. And everything works as expected. In case I wanted to like erase something, I can erase it as well. By the way, if I want to turn this off, come back in here. Turn off grids. Okay, so that is grids in Photoshop Sketch. Let's get out of that. And then I can work as I always have. So any questions there, let me know. Again, kind of clean it up. Similar to Illustrator. Illustrator does have perspective grids as well, but you don't get these nice, I could never, sort of like freely do something like that in perspective. So, yes, exactly. Thomas nailed it. So yes, just like in Adobe Illustrator. So it's good for the consistency. But in this case, like Photoshop doesn't have a perspective drawing tool, but Photoshop Sketch does. So you can still get those nice strokes. And then guess what? Sync it to your desktop as expected, just like that. Okay. Okay, Amber wants a VR AR week from Adobe. Fantastic. We will have, you might see some of that essentially anytime we have sort of a motion design week. We tend to talk about VR and AR. So that's, also always on the table. So that's coming up. Each week is something different. This week is illustration work as well. Okay, everything comes in on those fancy layers as expected, and I can continue to work on it with those nice brush strokes. All right. If I talk about drawing on the desktop, I do want to point out a couple things, a couple of really cool things. Let's do this. New layer. Here I am in Photoshop. I can just select a brush. I can paint. And what we have is typically we kind of have these mess of brushes. Thank you so much, Kyle T. Webster. But I don't know Natural Feel 1 versus 2. But you know what? You can actually save your favorites. So what you end up doing is sort of like creating a brush, like like maybe I'm doing now. I could create a brush, and maybe I might like this one. Actually, I do not. I can pick out a different brush that I might want to use, this Pastel Palooza, at a larger size, because I'm thinking, okay, I'd kind of like to use it, kind of want to like fill in this area, right, with this pastel brush, okay? It's not bad, you know? I might customize it a little bit based on its size and its color, okay? So I can customize it. I'll just make this a little more drastic. We'll do a purple, or excuse me, a pink. I'm like, okay, this is the brush that I'll want to use a lot. Okay, and you can see down here in brushes, I can add a new brush. And look at what we can do now in Photoshop. This is in Photoshop CC desktop app. We're capturing the brush size in the preset. We're including the tool settings, and we're including the color. That's why I made it pink. So we can include all those things. Clicking OK, pop. Here it is. Fantastic. Guess what? You can move it up and reorganize all these brushes, because you know, Kyle, I appreciate you, but you made so many brushes. So what do? I just put them, my favorites, under Paul's favorites. Now I don't have to worry about dealing with this super long list. You can see right over here or in the presets. I don't have to worry about that. I can just deal with the brushes that I want to work with and do the illustration that I want to do, essentially, is what I'm doing. So where did I go to make that brush? Manuel's asking. So essentially you select your brush. Typically what you'll do is, even right up here, this is typically, I went 2 different places for this and I apologize. But essentially you have the brush and then you have the preset. So the preset will allow you to add size and color to it. Here you're kind of just picking the brush and the hardness. Okay, but essentially this is where all your brushes will be. Okay, you can also load in new brushes as well. So you, right over here, you can do a new brush group or whatever. So essentially, we hired Kyle T. Webster, and he now works for Adobe. It took us forever. We begged and pleaded, saying, Kyle, come work for us. That way we can give your brushes out for free to everyone, exclusively to Photoshop and Creative Cloud members. And that's what we did. And now that we have him working for us, we can you know, get his brushes in the hands of more people. And this is your brushes panel. So window, brushes, organization of the brushes panel. And by the way, right down here, you can also see the size. I can increase the size of these because, again, this is much easier to see than just the names of brushes. So okay, so Siobhan, if you are bringing in Kyle T. Webster's brushes, they come in as a preset. So select really anything that can have a brush. Select a brush, and then right up here, it's going to be a preset. His come in as presets. So right here, and he'll tell you how to do this, by the way. But load tool presets is usually how you typically bring in Kyle T. Webster's brushes. And you can see the mass of them right in here. So it gets a little crazy. Hope you understand. Just switching over, just making sure I've talked about everything. We've opened everything in Illustrator and Photoshop. And checking to see if you have any questions. It's funny because when you talk about illustration, largely you end up talking about brushes. And yeah, that's why we end up talking about Kyle. He's a fantastic guy. Yeah, he's done like Thomas. Yes, he's done about 1,500 brushes. He keeps adding more and more because I've recorded videos where, you know, I've had to be corrected too many times because he keeps, you know, adding new brushes. So that's Kyle for you. Being hard to work with. So, all right, cool. And I'll just kind of switch over back to my screen. You can see I just opened up something that will hopefully kind of redeem myself from my ugly illustrations. But what's happening here is this is just an illustration I did. So let me just switch. Started in Illustrator, actually, because Illustrator allows you to create brushes as well, and that's what these are. These are brushes in Illustrator which are really cool. Let me open up the brushes panel just so you know the difference between Photoshop and Illustrator. Brushes in Illustrator allow you to have these cool graphics. So I can draw a path, right? Let's get rid of that. Let's just draw a path as we do. And then clicking on these custom brushes that I made in Illustrator, actually, I can swap out that flower from one flower to the next as I started creating this, sort of this element is what I was working on, sort of like having it follow her hair. And then I brought it into Photoshop, and there's kind of like the final version. So Illustrator allows you to dynamically change the brushes. Photoshop might have more brushes though. So anyways, hopefully everybody appreciates that. I really appreciate everyone watching. I'm going to bring up the schedule, and thank you so much for watching. Tune in all this week starting at 9 a.m. Pacific time with illustrators that are so much better than me, luckily. And join them. I want to thank you, Nathan and Axel and Martin and Renee, for watching chat, and Ali, just keep me in mind. You hopefully know who I am. My name is Paul Trani, and you can reach me at Paul Trani on Twitter and everything. So thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned all this week. Have a wonderful day. Be creative. Call your mom. Drink lots of water. Get 8 hours of sleep. And be creative most of all. And be kind to one another. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.